The first time I saw the factory farm, it was like stepping into a nightmare. The air was thick with the stench of manure and the constant hum of machinery. Cows, pigs, and chickens were crammed into tiny dark spaces, their eyes dull with suffering. It was as if the life had been sucked out of them and out of the land itself. This was not a farm. It was a factory, and the animals were just another product on the assembly line. I stood there, my stomach churning, wondering how this could be the source of the food we eat every day. How could something so cruel and so broken be the foundation of our meals? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The problems ran deep, and they touched every part of our lives. In my town, we used to have a school. It was a place where kids learned about the world, where they discovered the wonders of nature and the joys of learning. But that was a long time ago. For nearly 30 years, we haven't had a school of our own. The school system took our young people, filled their heads with ideas about the world of tomorrow, and sent them back to us as strangers. They were experts in things that had nothing to do with the land they came from, the community they belonged to, or the life they could lead here. The churches are still there, 2 of them, standing tall and proud. But they've been used by their denominations for almost a century to train student ministers. These ministers come and go, never staying long enough to become part of the community, never staying long enough to understand what it means to live here. They leave, and the town is left with a hollow echo of their presence. For a long time, the people who have influenced our town the most haven't been from the town. They haven't tried to see the good things that are here, the possibilities that lie just beneath the surface. They haven't wondered how a good and conserving life could be lived here, and in this, my town is not alone. This is the story of almost every neighborhood in our country, in the developed world. The big question we need to ask is not how to save the planet, but how to care for each small piece of it. How do we care for the millions of human and natural neighborhoods, each one unique and precious? How do we preserve the humble households and the land that sustains them? The answer, I believe, is love. Love is not some abstract idea. It's about the sparrows on the street, the lilies in the field, the people right in front of us. Love is humble and often goes unnoticed, but it's the only thing that can bring intelligence out of the big institutions and into the real work that needs to be done. Love doesn't always look heroic. It's often quiet, unassuming, and unrewarded, but it's powerful. It's the force that can see the beauty in the everyday, the value in the small things. It's the force that can make us think and act in ways that truly make a difference. We need to change the way we live. We need to waste less, do more for ourselves and each other, and live more simply. We can't keep living by robbing nature, pretending that we can continue to take without giving back. We need to understand that the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe are all part of a delicate balance that we're disrupting. We need to see that the ability to transport food for thousands of miles doesn't mean we're well off. It means we're more vulnerable, more dependent on a system that doesn't care about us. It means we're using up resources that future generations will need. We've become a nation of fantasists, believing in the infinite availability of finite resources. We're using land in ways that make it less fertile, less able to sustain us. We're building an economy that depends on the moods of a few stockbrokers, instead of the quality of the goods and services we need. We need to wake up and see the world for what it is. We need to understand that the way we eat, the way we live, and the way we treat the land are all connected. We need to take responsibility for our actions. and make choices that honor the world we live in. The first step is to eat responsibly, to know where our food comes from, to support local farmers, to grow our own food when we can, to eat with gratitude, to remember that every meal is a connection to the land and the people who work it, to eat with pleasure, to enjoy the flavors and the textures, to celebrate the mystery of life. This is not just about food. It's about how we live, how we treat each other, and how we treat the world. It's about recognizing that we are part of a larger community, a community that includes the soil, the water, the plants, and the animals. It's about understanding that our well-being is tied to the well-being of the land. We can't keep living the way we have been. We need to change, and we need to start now. The future of our town, our community, and our planet depends on it. We all eat, and what we eat and where it comes from can make a big difference in our lives and the world around us. Think about it. Every time you buy food, you're making a choice that affects not just your health, but also the health of the planet and the people who grow and make your food. Let's imagine a line like a timeline. But instead of time, this line shows different ways. People buy their food. On one end, there are the big supermarkets, where most people shop. These stores are everywhere, and they're packed with all sorts of foods from all over the world. It's easy and convenient, but it also means the food has traveled a long way to get there, and you might not know much about where it came from or how it was grown. As you move along the line, you start to see different ways people can buy food that are a bit more thoughtful and have less impact on the planet. For example, some people still shop at the big supermarkets, but they try to pick out foods that are grown locally or are organic. They might ask the store manager to stock more of these kinds of foods, and they might even bring their own bags and containers to reduce waste. Further along the line, you might find people who shop at smaller stores that focus on organic and locally grown foods. These stores might not be as convenient, and they might be a bit more expensive, but the food is often fresher and better for you and the environment. Some of these stores even offer classes on cooking and gardening, so you can learn more about where your food comes from and how to grow it yourself. Some people take it a step further and shop at both the big supermarkets and these smaller, more specialized stores. They might buy most of their food from the smaller stores, but still go to the big supermarkets for things they can't find elsewhere. This way, they're supporting local farmers and reducing their environmental impact, but they're also not completely cutting themselves off from the convenience of the big stores. At the far end of the line, you might find people who buy almost all their food from these smaller, specialized stores. They might even grow some of their own food in their gardens or on their balconies. These people are really committed to knowing where their food comes from and making choices that are good for their health and the planet. Each step along this line represents a different way of thinking about food and shopping. The closer you get to the end, with the smaller, more specialized stores, the more you're likely to be eating food that is better for you and the environment. But it also means you might have to spend more time and money, and you might have to travel a bit farther to get your groceries. So, where do you see yourself on this line? Maybe you're already shopping at the big supermarkets and thinking about trying to buy more local and organic foods. Or maybe you're already shopping at smaller stores and thinking about growing some of your own food. Whatever your choice, the important thing is to be aware of the impact your food choices have and to make decisions that feel right for you and the world around you. When it comes to making a difference in the world, especially in how we shop and eat, there are several steps we can take. Each step helps us support local farmers and businesses, and it can also make our food fresher and more sustainable. Let's explore these steps and see how they can fit into our lives. One big step is to shop at specialized stores that focus on organic and eco-friendly products. These stores are often smaller and might not have as many choices as big supermarkets, but they play a crucial role in supporting local and green businesses. By choosing to shop here, you're using your money to help these stores thrive, which in turn helps the local economy and the environment. Even if you can't buy everything you need here, making these stores your primary shopping spot can make a big impact. Another step is to visit farmers markets. These markets are usually open during the warmer months and offer a festive atmosphere where you can buy fresh produce directly from local farmers. Not only is the food fresher, but you also get to meet the people who grow it. This connection can be really rewarding and make shopping feel more personal. Plus, farmers markets often have other local crafts and goods, making it a fun community event. For those who are ready for a bigger commitment, you can join a community-supported agriculture (CSA) farm. With a CSA, you pay a farmer at the start of the growing season, and in return, you get a share of the harvest each week. This means you will get a lot of fresh, seasonal produce, and you'll need to plan your meals around what's available. It's a bit like having your own garden, and it requires some flexibility and creativity. But the food is incredibly fresh, and you get to support a local farmer directly. If you're interested in growing your own food, gardening can be a great addition to these other steps. Gardening lets you experience firsthand the challenges and joys of growing your own produce. It's a rewarding way to connect with nature and can provide some of the freshest food you'll ever taste. Plus, it's a fun and educational activity that can involve the whole family. But shopping and eating locally isn't just about the food. It's also about how we live and the choices we make as part of a community. John B. Cobb, Jr., a theologian, talks about how living simply and sustainably can be a form of Christian practice. He suggests that while we face many limits, like the finite resources of our planet and the challenges of overpopulation, we can still find hope and purpose in our actions. Cobb describes different ways Christians can respond to these challenges. One approach is Christian realism, which means working within the existing systems to make them more just and fair. This might involve forming alliances with other groups and using political and social influence to create change. Christian realists understand that change is slow and often incremental, but they keep working for justice even when it's difficult. Another approach is the eschatological attitude, which means living in a way that reflects a hopeful vision of the future, even if we don't know exactly how to get there. This might involve experimenting with new sustainable lifestyles or withdrawing support from harmful systems. Living this way can prepare us to make positive changes when opportunities arise. Cobb also talks about the discernment of Christ, which means looking for signs of God's presence and love in the world. This could be in the actions of people working for justice, in moments of personal growth, or in the creativity of artists and thinkers. By staying open to these signs, we can be guided in our actions and find meaning in our efforts. Finally, Cobb mentions the way of the cross, which reminds us that hope and sacrifice are closely linked. In a world where poverty and suffering are still prevalent, we must be willing to face these challenges and find ways to help, even if it means making personal sacrifices. This approach encourages us to look beyond our own comfort and work for the greater good. By taking these steps and adopting these attitudes, we can make a real difference in our communities and the world. Each choice we make, whether it's where we shop or how we live, can contribute to a more sustainable and just future. Affluent Christians often find themselves in a tricky spot. They know that the world is full of suffering and poverty, and they feel a calling to help. But how can they do this without giving up everything they have? The answer isn't to court suffering or live like monks. Instead, it's about finding a balance that honors both their faith and their responsibility to the world. Christians are taught to celebrate life, not repress it. But this celebration shouldn't involve wasteful luxury. In a world where so many people struggle to survive, it's important to live in a way that doesn't contribute to the problem. This means being mindful of how we use resources and being willing to make personal sacrifices. It's about swimming against the current of consumerism, even if it's hard and no one understands. One of the key teachings of Christianity is to identify with the poor. This isn't just about feeling sorry for them, it's about standing with them and working for their well-being. In the past, some Christians might have thought that their wealth could help spread prosperity. But now we know that wealth in one place often comes at the cost of poverty elsewhere. This means that Christians can't just sit back and enjoy their comfort. They need to take action. Some Christians choose to become advocates for the poor, using their voices and resources to push for change. Others might join movements that fight for justice. But there's another path that's becoming more important: embracing a simpler way of life. This doesn't mean living in rags or begging for food. It means stepping away from the system that values money and possessions above all else. It means being frugal and using what you have wisely. The Catholic Church has a long history of people who live this way, and some Protestant groups have tried to do the same, but these efforts haven't always been successful. Today, we need to think about new ways to live simply and support each other in this journey. We can learn from communities like the Ecumenical Institute and TAYS, where people live together and support each other in their faith. Living a simpler life can make Christians better advocates for the poor. When you don't have a lot of possessions, you're freer to help others and respond to their needs. This kind of life can also help Christians be more open to God's call. When you're not worried about losing your wealth, you're more willing to take risks and follow God's lead. But living simply isn't just about being a better Christian. It's also about having a vision for a better world. We need to imagine what a fair and just society might look like. We need to see a world where people and the planet are more important than money. This vision is crucial because it gives us something to work toward. Without it, our efforts can become legalistic and self-righteous. In the United States, we need to imagine an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy. We need to think about how we can feed more people without harming the environment. We need to imagine cities that are good places to live, where people can thrive without destroying the planet. We need to think about how we can pass on our values to the next generation without being oppressive. These visions are starting to take shape, but there's still a lot of work to do. People like Paulo Soleri have offered some great ideas, but we need to keep thinking and working together to make these visions a reality. Vision gives our efforts meaning and helps us stay motivated. Living simply and having a vision for a better world are important, but they come with a cost. We need to recognize that we're part of a broken system and that our efforts to change it will be difficult. We can't free ourselves from guilt, but we can open ourselves to God's grace. This grace helps us laugh at our own shortcomings and keep moving forward even when we're not perfect. For affluent Christians, the journey toward a simpler life and a better world is a challenging but essential one. It's about recognizing our flaws, seeking God's help, and working together to create a more just and compassionate society. Juliet. SCORE found that only about 1 in 4 adults would choose to work full-time if they had enough money to live comfortably. She believes that the way jobs are structured today doesn't fit everyone's needs. SCORE suggests that the government should create tax policies that encourage companies to offer more flexible work options. For example, people could trade some of their income for more time off, share jobs with others, or work part-time with better benefits. She also thinks that mandatory overtime should be banned, and workers should get time off instead of extra pay for working overtime. Everyone should have at least 4 weeks of vacation each year. These changes could create more jobs and help people have a better balance between work and personal life. Jeremy Rifkin has a different idea. He suggests that the government should tax companies that make a lot of money and use that money to give grants to non-profit organizations. These organizations could then hire more people to do important work that helps solve social problems. This way, the government wouldn't need to grow bigger and the quality of the work would be high because only proven organizations would get the grants. One way to find more money for these changes is to reduce defense spending. This would not only save a lot of money, but also help the environment because the defense industry is a major polluter. War is one of the biggest sources of pollution. Another big issue is that politicians are often influenced by corporations because they give money to political campaigns. To fix this, we need to change how campaigns are funded. We could make voting mandatory, like in Australia, where people who don't vote have to pay a fine. We could also have universal voter registration, which could be done through the post office or the IRS. Voting should be on weekends to make it easier for people to participate. Eric Fromm, a famous thinker, believed that our society's focus on buying and consuming things is a big problem. He suggested creating a government agency similar to the FDA, but for consumption. This agency would include experts from different fields, like scientists, sociologists, and environmentalists. They would work together to encourage sane consumption, which means buying things that are good for people and the planet. They would also educate the public on how to live more sustainably and reduce waste. We could also expand national service programs where people can work on solving problems in their communities. These jobs would pay less, but offer good benefits, like housing, healthcare, and educational opportunities. This could help people learn how to live more sustainably and build stronger communities. We must continue to fight for justice and equality. We need to support laws that prevent discrimination and ensure that everyone has a fair chance, no matter their background. This includes supporting affirmative action and other policies that help underrepresented groups. But we can't just focus on our own country. We need to think globally. If we make changes in our country, corporations might just move to other countries. We need to work with organizations like the World Bank to support projects that help the poor without harming the environment. To bring about these changes, we need a strong social movement. 2 big obstacles are advertising and corporate influence. Advertising is everywhere, and it often promotes a lifestyle that is harmful to people and the planet. We pay for advertising through higher prices and lost taxes. It also supports harmful products like cigarettes and alcohol, and it undermines the freedom of the press. We need to put limits on advertising, especially when it targets children or promotes harmful products. Corporations are another big problem. They are focused on making money, often at the expense of people and the environment. We need to find ways to regulate corporations and make sure they are accountable to the public. One idea is to have boards of directors that include representatives from different stakeholder groups, not just shareholders. To make these changes, we need public participation. We need to support community groups, unions, and cooperatives. We need to work together to demand change and build a better future for everyone. The idea of poverty often blends into a category that could be called near poverty. This includes many hard-working middle-class Americans who feel they are just barely making ends meet. They might resent any suggestion that they have more than enough. These people often feel unhappy because they believe they haven't met the standards of success set by society and themselves. They see the abundance displayed in TV commercials and wish they could have more. They end up in debt because they keep buying things they don't really need, just to keep up with what they see advertised. For these people, the idea of sufficiency, having enough but not too much, means not trying to live like the rich. It means being more politically mature and working to limit the wealth and power of those who have too much. While it's hard to draw a clear line between sufficiency and excess, it's clear that many Americans consume far more than they need. This overconsumption is like an addiction where people buy more and more things they don't really need. To help the poor, those who consume too much need to change their lifestyles and consume less. This isn't just about the super-rich. It affects the middle class, too. Even if you make a good salary, you should still think carefully about what you really need. Voluntary restraint on consumption means that buying things isn't just about what you can afford. Instead, it's about what you truly need. For example, someone making $85,000 a year shouldn't feel entitled to buy more just because they can afford it. But this doesn't mean you should just hoard your money. Instead, you can use your money in ways that are good for the environment and don't deplete resources. You can spend less on things like gasoline, new appliances, and grain-fed beef, and instead use that money for activities like hiking, cultural events, or education. You can also donate to causes that help the poor, support community projects, or even help friends in need. However, individual changes alone won't be enough to help the poor. We need political action to redistribute wealth more fairly. This means getting involved in politics, whether by voting, contacting public officials, or joining advocacy groups. Some people might choose to express their solidarity with the poor by adopting a simpler lifestyle, which can be a powerful statement against consumerism. The idea of sufficiency can be more radical for people of faith, but it's essential for everyone to move toward a lifestyle that consumes less. This change is crucial for creating a just and sustainable world. It requires a new understanding of the world's problems and a vision for a better future. People need to feel the pressure to change, both from economic realities and from political movements. For some, faithfulness might mean not just helping the poor, but actually becoming poor themselves. This can be a powerful way to show solidarity, but it's not the only way. Some might find that working for systemic change is more effective. This can involve studying, organizing, and persisting in the face of challenges. Simply giving away your possessions might not change the system, but working to create a more just society can make a real difference. In a world where poverty is widespread and resources are limited, we need to set limits on wealth and income. Policies must focus on meeting everyone's basic needs in a sustainable way. This means changing how we produce, distribute, and recycle resources. Economic activities should serve human needs, not just growth and profit. Full employment should mean giving people meaningful jobs that benefit society. We need a combination of centralized planning and local initiatives to ensure that resources are used fairly and sustainably. The shift away from consumerism can be hard, but it can also lead to a more fulfilling life. Consumerism is a poor substitute for the meaningful relationships and community that make life truly rich. Jesus taught that true abundance comes from restored relationships with God and others, not from material possessions. By focusing on community, we can find a deeper sense of purpose and joy. To live a lifestyle of faith and true human selfhood, it's important to be part of a supportive community. This community can help you break old habits of consumption, make responsible spending decisions, and practice conservation. You can share resources and skills and work together on political advocacy. You can also enjoy activities that bring you closer together and celebrate life. In a world full of greed and pain, such a community can still find joy and hope. By living simply and working for a just and sustainable future, they can make a real difference. The idea of living simply has been a part of American life for a very long time. It's like a thread that weaves through our history, sometimes strong and visible, other times hidden but still there. This thread connects people from different times and places, each adding their own twist to what it means to live simply. Back in the early days of America, the Puritans believed in a simple life focused on God. They thought that showing off wealth was wrong, and they worked hard to avoid it. They even made laws to stop people from dressing too fancy or spending too much money. For the Puritans, simplicity wasn't just a personal choice. It was a way to keep the whole community focused on what was truly important. Later, the Quakers took simplicity a step further. They believed that everyone should live simply, not just the poor. John Woolman, a famous Quaker, talked about how working too much and owning too much stuff could lead to bad things, like slavery. He thought that if everyone lived simply, the world would be a better place. This idea wasn't just about saving money. It was about creating a fairer, more just society. During the time of the American Revolution, people like Samuel Adams and Thomas Jefferson thought about how a simple life could help build a strong democracy. They worried that if everyone was too focused on getting rich, the country would become corrupt. They believed that a simple life could help people focus on what really mattered, like being good citizens and taking care of each other. In the mid-1800s, writers like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau had a different take on simplicity. They lived in a time when the country was growing fast and people were getting richer. But Thoreau, for example, thought that all the stuff people were buying was making them unhappy. He lived in a small cabin by a lake and wrote about how much better life was when you didn't have to worry about money or possessions. For him, simplicity meant having more time to think, read, and enjoy nature. After the Civil War, things changed again. People were moving to cities, and life was getting busier and more complicated. But some people, like the editor of the Ladies' Home Journal, Edward Bok, started talking about how to make life simpler. They wanted to help people find a balance between work and leisure, and they thought that simpler, more beautiful things could make life better. This led to a movement in design, where people like William Morris and Gustav Stickley made furniture that was both simple and practical. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the government even tried to create communities where people could live more simply. These were called subsistence homesteads, and they were supposed to help people grow their own food and work together. But most of these communities didn't last very long. After World War II, things got more complicated again. People started buying more and more stuff. And the idea of living simply seemed old-fashioned. But in the 1960s, young people started questioning all of this. They thought that the American dream of having a big house and lots of stuff wasn't making people happy. They started living in communes, growing their own food, and trying to live in a way that was better for the planet. In the 1970s, when there was an energy crisis, people started thinking about simplicity in a new way. They realized that using less energy and resources could help solve big problems like pollution. This led to the idea of voluntary simplicity, where people chose to live with less, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Books like the Whole Earth catalog showed people how to live more simply and sustainably. Even today, the idea of living simply is still around. Some people choose to live in tiny houses, grow their own food, and buy only what they need. Others join cooperatives where they work together to make life better for everyone. And many people, no matter where they live, try to be more mindful about what they buy and how they use resources. Living simply isn't always easy, and it's not for everyone. But the idea has a long and rich history in America, and it keeps coming back because it offers a different way of thinking about what makes life good. It reminds us that sometimes less can be more. As we wrap up our journey through the history of simplicity, it's clear that the simple life has been a powerful and enduring idea. From the early Christians who cared for the poor and shared everything, to the Desert Fathers who renounced the world to find deeper spiritual meaning, the call to simplicity has echoed through the centuries. Each generation has found its own way to live simply, and each has left us valuable lessons. The simple life isn't just about owning less stuff or living in a small house. It's about making choices that align with what truly matters to us. It's about finding contentment in the present moment and not being consumed by the endless pursuit of more. It's about recognizing that our happiness and fulfillment come from within, not from what we have or what others think of us. In today's world, simplicity can feel like a radical idea. We're bombarded with messages telling us to buy more, work harder, and achieve more. But the stories of those who have embraced simplicity show us that there's another way. They remind us that we can live meaningful, fulfilling lives without sacrificing our values or our well-being. Living simply doesn't mean living poorly. It means living intentionally. It means choosing what's important to us and letting go of what's not. It means finding joy in the small things, like a walk in nature, a good book, or a conversation with a friend. It means having the freedom to pursue what truly brings us happiness, whether that's spending time with loved ones, creating art, or helping others. The simple life isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. What simplicity looks like will be different for each person. For some, it might mean living in a tiny house or growing their own food. For others, it might mean downsizing their home, simplifying their schedule, or cutting back on unnecessary expenses. The key is to find what works for you and to make choices that bring you closer to the life you want to live. In the end, the simple life is a personal journey. It's about finding balance, purpose, and joy in a world that often seems out of control. It's about living in a way that honors our values and contributes to the well-being of others. As John Burroughs once said, "The secret of my youth is the simple life, simple food, sound sleep, the open air, daily work, kind thoughts, love of nature, and joy and contentment in the world in which I live." So, as you move forward, remember that simplicity is a choice. It's a choice to live with intention, to prioritize what truly matters, and to find happiness in the present moment. It's a choice that can bring peace, fulfillment, and a deeper connection to the world around us. And in a world that often feels overwhelming, that's a choice worth making.